I would apologize to the Palestinians for a lot of a lot of bad things that were done to them. Of course, they've done bad things to us as well, but I'm talking about my side. As an occupier and as someone who is stronger, I think that the first hand to show should be my hand.
Can a Palestinian, a Jew, and an American constructively debate the Israel-Palestine situation? 100% yes. I dare say they're even friends. In fact, they've been meeting for years here in Houston through the Reconciliation for Justice and Peace in Israel-Palestine organization. Welcome back to the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. My name is Simi Hundle, and I'm your host for the program. Again, as always, the mission of our program is to build better bridges between communities. The Israel-Palestine conflict is a complex issue that many do not fully understand, including myself. Claims for the area can be dated back to 3,000 years ago with Abraham and his descendants. For millennia, the area has been ruled by multiple empires and has endured numerous conflicts. The mission of today's program is to learn a little about the history of the land, listen to differing opinions, and then propose solutions. We have three great speakers today. Guy Cohen, an Israeli immigrant to the U.S., has had a rich career in theater. And in Houston, Guy has served as the Director of Culture Affairs at the Israel Consulate to the Southwest. He is now the Communication and Research Manager of the American Friends of Sheba Medical Center. Nabil Chayeb, who was born in the Ein Elhelwi refugee camp in South Lebanon, is a Palestinian immigrant to the U.S. Nabil graduated from Lebanese University in 1977 and then attended 2 years at WIT in Boston, where he founded the National Union of Palestinian Students. An opportunity to work for the royal family of Saudi Arabia brought Nabil down to Houston. Lastly, Alex McDonald. He is an American and a Quaker. He's dedicated several years studying the Israel-Palestine issue, visiting the land, and learning from its people. He is a co-founder of the Texas Coalition for Human Rights, and his most recent book, How I Learned to Speak Israel, is a guide for Americans wanting to better understand the Israel-Palestine situation. Enjoy our program today. Alex, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Simi. Great to be here.
Sure. Guy, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. Nabil, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be there. Thanks.
Likewise, I'm very glad to have you here. Well, we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time, so let's dig right into it. Let's start with the history of the region of Israel and Palestine. Guy, would you like to start by sharing your notes on the region?
Thank you. It's it's a funny subject to start with, because the history is a long period of time. Where do you want me to start? I mean, we can argue about differences in the way we see history any given time of the history of this region. For 1,000 years and for 20 years. I mean, you will have debates coming from each period of this history. Who was here before? Who's owning the land? Who was deported? Who was occupied? I think the question, and I'm sure that we will touch it in the next part of this conversation, is the future. This is much more important than the history. And if you're asking about the history, the most important thing that I want to say about the history that needs to be remembered, that not everyone have this understanding, is when in the Jewish history, and you're talking about the 20th century, you're talking about the establishments of the re-establishments of the state of Israel. when in the Jewish history this event took place. And this event took place immediately after the Holocaust.
Mm.
And those two events are tied. It's impossible to untie them. It's true that the return of the Jewish people to their homeland has occurred a lot of time before. There's a lot of history that we can talk before that.
Mm-hmm.
But the establishment of the State of Israel, the most important detail for me in the history perspective is right after the Holocaust, right after 6 million Jews have been murdered by the Nazi regime. By the way, today, my daughter showed me that some far-right groups has declared that this today is the neo-Nazi National Day.
Wow.
So this is happening right as we recording this conversation. And also, I checked just before this conversation, I checked the FBI website. And out of 1,500 cases that was reported as hate crimes in a religion point of view, 59.8%, which is 60%, was against Jews.
Wow.
This is something that you need to understand when you're talking about history more than details. In this date, the declaration of the reestablishment of the State of Israel was done, and then after that the war started, and then we occupied, and then they attacked, and then we occupied again, and then they attacked. It's a mess. You will never, you don't have to, you are unable to put a stop to it because it's a continuous situation that started thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a point in time that is still significant to us. And it will be significant when we continue speaking about what the solution might be. I hope I answered your question.
It's heavy that this is that day that you mentioned, the neo-Nazi day. I did not recognize that. And that's a good reminder that hate is still alive and well in the world. Alex, can you talk a little bit more about the history from the Zionism movement, from the origins of that movement up to, let's say, 1947, the UN partition plan for Palestine?
Sure. So Theodore Herzl is sort of the founder of modern day Jewish Zionism. He really started the first Zionist Congress. I believe it was in 1896. He wrote the book Der Judenstaat, which is the Jewish state. And from that Congress, the Zionists decided that they wanted a land, and there were three places that they considered: Argentina, one in Africa, and Palestine. And they chose Palestine, and they lobbied very hard for it, successfully. And they, with the World War I, they were able to influence the British government. And the primary gentleman who was very influential there became the first president of Israel, Chaim
Weizmann.
And Lord Balfour wrote a letter to Rothschild in 1917 that became what was known as the Balfour Declaration, which basically said that there would be a homeland for Jews in Palestine. There are other parts to the Balfour Declaration, but that was very influential. And immigration started in the late 1800s after the Jewish Congress. there have always been Jews in Palestine over the millennia, since well, at least since 1400 BC. But more immigrants from Europe and so on started coming in the late 1800s. But the massive increase occurred after the Balfour Declaration. And so in like 1922, the British had the mandate for 400 years, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire. And after World War I, they lost with the help of the Arabs, the whole Arab continent. And for many of you may be familiar with Lawrence of Arabia, that story. And they fought the Ottoman Empire in exchange for their liberation. That was the deal the British did. Unfortunately, the British did 3 deals. The first deal was with the Arabs and they lost 20,000 men in the fighting against the Ottoman Empire. And the next deal was with the French, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which was like a year later. And then in 1917, a year later, they did the Balfour Declaration. And so the problem was the British promised to 3 groups the same territory in some ways. And I would say that that's really where the problem is the expectations. That was the real foundation of the problem, because they've been living, Jews and Muslims and Christians had been living for hundreds, if not thousands, well, hundreds of years together in relative harmony. It was after that massive invasion of immigrants. And so the British ran the mandate, which at the time was the League of Nations created, and to basically implement the Balfour Declaration. And in 1936, there was a major revolt by the Arab population, because they could see, they had said, hey, we fought for this for our independence. And they could see that the British were giving preferential treatment to the immigrant Jewish population. And they could see that the numbers were changing. So in 1920, or in the 19 teens, 90% of the population, 10% of the population was Jewish. And there were as many, if not more, Christians than there were Jews. But by 1945, a third of the population was Jewish, and the population had grown as an overall number. So the Arabs saw, everybody was Palestinian in those days. So the Arabs saw that their numbers, their majority was shrinking, and they didn't want to lose self-determination. And so in 36, they had a revolt. And that lasted really for 3 years. And the British came up at that point and said, you know, this is a real problem. We don't know what to do with it. And that was when the plan came up for dividing the country into 2. And the problem is the maps that they created, the Zionists didn't like. And in fact, they assassinated the British Foreign Secretary based in Cairo. And the 2 assassins, their bodies are now buried at Mount Herzl as a honorary burial as heroes of the state of Israel. So in any event, finally, the British, with the help of the Zionist Jews, the British helped create some of the militias that ended up being the militias that took over in 48, to quell the Arab uprising. And so with World War II, things continue. And shortly after World War II, the United Nations was created. The mandates ended, and the British wanted to get rid of this problem that they had created with all this tension. And so the UN and the US needed, Harry Truman needed what they called at the time the Jewish vote. And there was a very strong lobbying effort in the United States. And so he took to the case where they threatened, so after World War II, a lot of the countries were severely destroyed in Europe. So France, for example, really wanted US aid. And foreign aid was threatened if they did not vote in support of the partition plan. And so the partition plan gave most of the land to the Jewish state, even though Jews represented a third of the population, and like 56%. And so anyway, and as soon as that passed, fighting erupted between the Zionists and the native population, the Palestinian population. And that continued for about 6 months, at which time Israel declared itself a state. And when it did that, so we have a map here. And when they did that, the armies of the neighboring Arab countries moved in, and it became a sort of a grab for whatever land. Prior to the fighting, Golda Meir went and visited the king of Jordan and sort of said, hey, this is what we, what do you think if we took land? And he said, yeah, but just, I want the West Bank. And so they fought for the West Bank and ultimately got much of it. But the map of the partition plan was never implemented. Jerusalem, for example, was an international zone. That never happened. The lines, even the day that Israel declared independence, Israel had already taken much more land than was part of the partition plan. And when the armistice agreements were signed in 1949 with the neighboring states, Israel had 78% of historic Palestine instead of the 56% of the partition plan. You want me to stop there?
Thank you for that. That was great, Alex, and that got into many of the details. Nabil, I want to talk to you now. You were born in South Lebanon as a refugee, from my understanding, a Palestinian refugee. You went to the United Nations Schools for Palestinian Schools, there, UNRWA. And I want to talk about the time period that Alex just finished talking about, up from 1947 to current day today. Can you talk about, one, the overall history of the region from 1947 to today? And then I would love to hear your personal experience as well, growing up in the region.
Thank you for having me, and thanks, Alex, for the full review of the area. My name is Nabil Chayeb. I was born in Ein Elhelwi camp, which is a refugee camp for Palestinians that they were forced to, or were expelled from Palestine. My father, we are from a city called Safad, which is in the North Galilee of Palestine or Israel. And the closest one to run, if you run for your safety, the closest country was Lebanon or Syria, that's in the northern of Palestine. My father, with his family, because they were attacked in 1948 by, and unfortunately, we talk about Jewish militias. When you say militias, you expect people with guns and some grenades. Unfortunately, the Jewish militias back in 1947, they had tanks, they had airplanes, so they were regular army, they were not militias. So be honest with you, it's not fair to call them militias. if they were militias, the Palestinian population or the indigenous people were able to defend themselves. But unfortunately, the British Army were doing strip search and house-to-house search for any gun in any house of the Palestinian people back 1947 and before. So the Palestinians were never armed like the Israeli militias or the Jewish militias, which they took the arms from the British, or the British facilitated the arms to the Jewish militias, either one. So that's why we lost the war. And when you say like the Arabs came and attacked to help the Palestinians, it was volunteer army, ill-equipped, ill-fed. I mean, really, it wasn't a war. Anyways, but let's move forward, pass forward to refugee camps. And my personal experience as a refugee in Ein Elhelwi camp in South Lebanon, about 3 kilometers north of Saida, city of Saida in Lebanon. We were 70,000 refugees in 1.5 square kilometer. We had one doctor for the 70,000 people. Only one doctor was assigned and 2 nurses. Yeah, that's all we had. So, and the prescription for each one of us, it's aspirin. Tylenol wasn't even introduced back then. You have headache, you get aspirin. You have diarrhea, you get aspirin. So only one thing is available. And if you have like cut, there is something called iodine. I mean, I used to be like, anybody can be a doctor at that point because there's, 70,000 people, and the best pharmacy was olive oil. If you have stomach ache, you rub your stomach with olive oil, and God knows if it works or not, but maybe it's psychological effect, it works. So it wasn't a happy life. It was miserable life. It was hard life. In winter, definitely the Lebanese government did not support us with any electricity or any sewage system or any form of life. We were denied everything except with the United Nations was providing some food, which is like 5 cents per person per day. So it was really, I don't want to go into details with this, but I remember, we used to eat 1 time a day. That's it. That's all the food we can afford. And in fact, we were 9 people living in a tent, and we only have 2 apples. So the apples used to get rotten because nobody wants to eat them. So the other person cannot have a piece of apple. And we didn't have the wisdom to slice the apple or get together or to distribute it on the whole family. So we were cramped in like 9 people sometimes in 1 tent or in 1 shanty home, like a shed, like what we call shed here in America that use it for dogs. And we had only 1 bathroom for every 5,000 people. It was popular, it's public bathroom, not like the one you see mobile here. No, it was even worse. So people used to be in line trying to go use the human thing. So we were raped of our happiness, of our future, of our even dignity as human beings. Even if we want to go to the bathroom, we were exposed. So Israel did not just take the land. It took our future, it raped our future, raped our childhood. I never had childhood myself. I never had bicycle like most people do. I never had played the game like those kids do. So we were born men to go and work and bring food or pieces of wood. The roof of our tents or shanty homes were made out of zinc. I don't know, it's like tint. And it had holes. So I remember I'm not young. I remember my mom used to wake up at night and put buckets to prevent the water coming on our heads or our. So if I keep going on and on, it's really miserable life in short. Anyways, we made it out. We decided to live. We decided to reject this situation and go to schools and have. And I remember me and my generation, even the older than me, we used to go to the city lights to study and do our homework because we didn't have lights in the camp. Or we go to the English burial centers. We had like English get killed there, and they have cemeteries, and it was lit beautifully. So we'll go and do our homework between the graves at night, so we have some light. The worst thing is, at 8 o'clock at night, the Lebanese government forced curfew on the Palestinians. So we had to come back to the camp before 8 p.m. So we we were kids, like 12 years old or 10 years old, and the Lebanese interior security, whatever, I mean, they will abuse us. I mean, they will kick us bad. I mean, so honestly, we didn't have any better treatment, not from the Israelis and not from the hosting country, the Lebanon, the Lebanese government. So finally, the Palestinians woke up to fight. I mean, they waited for Security Council. They waited for the Arab government. They waited for Israel to allow the refugees to go back, which is like in any normal situation. In a state of war, there are refugees. When things cools down, the refugees come back to their homes, to their land. Unfortunately, Israel did not allow till today any refugee to go back to Palestine, to his home, even though in 2018 I was in Palestine and my home, our home, still exists, and I'm not allowed to get into my house.
Powerful stories you're sharing, Nabil. Guy, I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the stories that Nabil is sharing from an Israeli perspective. What are some of your thoughts about what Nabil's sharing?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that when you talk about personal history, there is nothing that I can say. I mean, I cannot say to Nabil that something that he experienced or had in his history, I have another point of view about it. I mean, it's not, it will be ridiculous. This is his life. That's how he lived. You are asking about the situation. There's a lot, almost every sentence that Alex said and that Nabil said, I have a different perspective about it. But we will not start this argument here because it will never end. An hour, you said we have an hour. An hour is just getting us started. We will not end anything. Sure. When I heard Nabil's story for the first time, my reaction was as yours. I hated the fact that he had to go through it, and I wish that it will never happen again. Not only in Israel-Palestine, everywhere in the world. Refugees are now not only Israeli and Palestine issue. It's all over the world now. And the world is not going to such a good place the way I see it. So we have to hear more of Nabil's stories in order to understand that we have to change something.
I hear you. And on that note, before we hit the record button, you were talking about you just needed 10 minutes to talk about a solution to Israel and Palestine. Can you talk more about what are your thoughts about the situation today and how do you see a solution moving forward?
You're asking me?
Yes, Guy, please.
I think that the main problem is that the parties will not talk. The cease in the conversation and the excuses that people are giving, we don't have any partner, they don't want us, they want to kill us. You can hear both sides say the same story. But this is something that cannot be solved other ways. If I was the one that was talking from the Israeli point of view, I would go first to the most burning problem, which is Jerusalem. I would declare Jerusalem as a place of its own. I mean, not Israeli, not Palestinian, not Jordanian, not anything. Something like the Vatican, okay?
That's what I was thinking
Controlled
too.
by forces from all over the world. I don't care. Citizens of Israel should be equal, of Jerusalem should be equal, and the access to the holy places of the three main religion that find Jerusalem the holy city should be free and equal to everyone. This is the main thing, and every religion has to be sure and has to know that it is safe. This is where I would start. To the question of refugees, and I do not want to go into the maybe political answer that the Jewish several of them are refugees too, and I don't want to start with blaming the other countries for not accepting the refugees. I would say, listen, this is the situation now. How do we solve it? Let's give the right of return for a number of refugees that we will agree upon. It can be 50,000, it can be 100,000. People who are direct refugees, not grandchildren of grandchildren of grandchildren. I don't know who. I mean, we have to talk about it. Give them the right of return. Give them a citizenship. Give them some territories and houses if it's where they were, or something that they will be willing to take. The rest of the families, let's compensate it. Let's compensate them. Use some of the world's support of Israel to compensate those refugees. Help them change their situation as refugees in the countries that they are. Of course, it's a global solution. It's not only depends on Israel. I would also do something that a lot of Israelis will not agree. I mean, a lot of Israel will not agree with a lot of things that I'm saying, but I would do another thing. I would apologize to the Palestinians for a lot of a lot of bad things that were done to them. Of course, they've done bad things to us as well, but I'm talking about my side. As an occupier and as someone who is stronger, I think that the first hand to show should be my hand. The first step should be my step. So that's what I would do. There are a lot of questions that will be still open. I would go for two-state solution. So other than Jerusalem, I would separate this country for two states, because I believe that one state has to be still Jewish, and this has a lot of problems within it. Alex, if you had 10 more hours, I'm sure that you would fill them with no problem. But giving the situation of the Jewish people until today and still today, we have to have a state that is a Jewish state, and none of us will give it up. But it doesn't have to be covering the whole territory that is now called Israel or Palestine. We can share it. We should share it. We will benefit from it if we have neighbors that we can live with, trade with, and thrive with. This is my solution. I know it's a dream solution, but guess what? I think it's possible.
Nabil, what are your thoughts on that solution?
Well, let me just start by saying if every Israeli like Guy, I think we'll have peace tomorrow.
Mm.
He's a human being. His heart is full of humanity, and that's what I respect a lot. But anyways, we cannot talk about Nabil and Guy experience, or Mel Gross, or Jay Hamburger, or Alex McDonald. We're talking about two nations, two peoples. The problem is that here we had the Palestinians were in denial after 1948. They refused any kind of solution. So they kept losing and losing and losing. And I think, I believe even if they agree to any solution, Israel will go back and say no. But let's take face value of the United Nations resolutions. The Israelis are in denial. I'm talking the Israeli government, especially. I'm directing my message to the Israeli government. They are in denial. They don't, till now, they don't recognize Palestinians people. Palestinians recognized Israel in 1987 in Algiers, with Israel as secure border, and based on Palestinians will accept 22% of the historical land of Palestine, which is West Bank and Gaza, to establish their own state and have some refugee solutions like what Guy went over. The problem Israel now is not going toward peace whatsoever. And I think I blame mostly the United States because of its blind support of the state of Israel. Had the United States put some pressure on Israel, we wouldn't, I mean, United States claimed many times that they are against settlements in the West Bank. It's against moving populations under occupation, whatever. And Israel is doing it day and night. Israel is doing collective punishment. If one family member does something, throws stone at an Israeli tank, immediately their house will be bulldozed, their family will be taken to jail, and more like this. So the message is to the Israelis to wake up and smell the coffee. After all, we need to sit down and talk peace. And okay, we have to accept, we cannot be in denial and ignore the state of Israel that it doesn't exist right there. No, there are Israelis. By the way, the Jewish presence in the Middle East been there since Muhammad and Moses, and so the Jewish presence in the Middle East is not something strange to us. But when somebody comes by force to replace the other one, that's where we have the problem. Had any Jewish guy come and wants to buy my extra land behind my house, sure, we do the deed restrictions and we sell the land. No, they didn't come by flowers. They didn't go to a title company and transfer the land. They came by guns and by killing. In 1947, too many massacres happened, and they're discovering bones in Haifa now with grave sites. But anyways, let's move forward to solutions now. We don't want to keep talking about miseries and dramas. I believe, and this is, I would say about 60% of the Palestinians will agree to this, to have one state in the whole state of Palestine with all equal in rights, equal in freedom of religion. Any Jew has the right to go to Nablus, and any Palestinian has the right to go to Tel Aviv. And you know, we have to go through a normalization period within 10 years, open borders, have armies, have institutions, have justices and court systems where everybody is equal. And if Israel has the land and it has learned to accept any Jew in the world, why they cannot accept the Palestinians? So this is double standard right there. If any Jew can come fly tomorrow to Ben Gurion Airport, he will get citizenship and housing and support and whatever. While we have almost 3 million Palestinians on the borders of Israel are denied and to go to their homes, to their land, and you can see your land just across the fence. So we need, honestly, it's the solution is in the hands of the United States. If it wants to, they can force the solution, like what they're doing in Ukraine now. They don't want Russia to be victorious. So why you're allowing Israel and you keep putting pressure on the Palestinians? That's and the solution to me, in short, by one state with all equal, one man, one vote, men, women, freedom of religion, freedom of press, peace and security for all. And that's, I think, the ideal solution, like where we live in the great country of United States of America here.
Well, you have offered some practical advice with powerful personal stories. I really appreciate you guys being open and sharing your thoughts in such a constructive way. I'm going to turn to the last segment of the program where I'm going to offer 60 seconds to each of you to share your last minute thoughts with the audience or plug any news or specific item. Alex, I'm thinking about you and your book that you've released recently, that you've written recently. So feel free to speak for 60 seconds on any topic that comes to mind. Alex, do you want to talk about the book that you've written recently?
Sure. So I used to be a Zionist just because I didn't know any other thing growing up. But the more I researched it, the more I realized that I had been misled by language. And so I've written a book called How I Learned to Speak Israel, An American's Guide to a Foreign Policy Language. I've written that book too, but that's a different book. Yeah, that's one. And so anyway, I encourage people, you can get more information at speakisrael.info. I would just like to say from an American perspective, for the 30 seconds I have left, I think it's important that we base American support based on our values. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal and have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think Nabil raised some issues of inequality. I think it's important that the audience knows that there are actually more Palestinians under Israeli control today than there are Jews. So even though it's called a Jewish state, in the occupied territories, which Israel also controls, and in Israel proper, there are still slightly more Palestinians. And that's why many Israelis don't want the one-state solution that Nabil was raising. But I also hold Guy to a standard that, yes, he's willing to apologize. And by the way, Guy is great. The current government is very different than Guy's perspective. But I think it's important that even though they say they're sorry, they're not willing to allow the Palestinians to come back, all of them that want to. So it is still based on ethnic discrimination. And so as an American, I think it's important that we support our values. And since we support about 20% of the Israeli military budget, we Americans, and the most vetoes in the United Nations Security Council for the United States are to protect Israel's violations of human rights. So I'll leave it at that. But I think it's important that Americans understand the complicity and the allowance of impunity and the double standard, as was brought up, between Ukraine and Israel, which really hurts our brand as well. Thank you. Thanks for having this program.
Alex. For sure, Alex. And I've enjoyed reading your book. I do recommend it. How I Learned to Speak Israel. Guy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think that from this conversation, which didn't touch the whole subject, we have a lot to talk about, but I'm taking one point, and the point is that as long as we still have anti-Semites, as long as we still have people who hate Jews just for being Jews, and this is the most, as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, it's the most hate crimes in the world in religion point of view. We will have the state of Israel Jewish. We can talk about borders. We can divide the land over there. We can put on another state, but there will never, ever be a one state that has no safe house for the Jewish people. We've learned it from the Holocaust. We are still learning it from the hate around the world. And I suggest talking about one state for all is right, is amazing, is democratic, it's true, everything, all positive things I can say about it. But there is one no. It will not happen as long as there is still hatred for Jews just because they are Jews. We've learned it from the Holocaust. This is our burn from the history. And I suggest another solution, which is the two-state solution. I think it's rational and I think it will be amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to you and to Alex and to Nabil.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nabil, the floor is yours.
Well, I want to take advantage of this setting here to plead to the Israelis to enough blood, enough killing, enough is enough. We've been fighting for, I would say, 74 years, because that's when the state of Israel was created, but even before, few years before that too. The anti-Semite that my friend Guy raised, we as human beings, we tend always to feel with the underdog. I mean, if we watch boxing match, we always feel with the one who's losing. We feel like sympathetic to him. The problem with anti-Semite now is more and more because the whole world is witnessing the abusements of the Palestinians on the hands of the Israelis. And we have more and more sympathetic people looking at the Palestinians as underdogs, as the victims, as injustice applied to the Palestinians, and that will help instigate that anti-Semite. I think the best solution for the Israelis to stop the killing, stop that forcing things by force. Let's come to sit to negotiating table, to a round table, talk about our kids, our futures, how to build together, how to work together, and not to hear, because what's the situation in Palestine is not helping. It's aggravating the anti-Semite, not just in Israel, not in the Middle East, not in Europe, but it's everywhere, even in the United States of America. Americans are fed up with Israelis' policy, especially with government now in Israel, which a new guy, his name is Itmar Ben-Gvir, he was nobody just a few years ago except troublemaker. Now he threatens the Palestinians in the Knesset. He wants to kick them out and put them under arrest. I mean, what kind of government is this? What, accepting somebody like this in their government? This is the face of Israel right now. So I hope they can work on that and improve that face. And our hands as Palestinians is extended to have peace. We have President Mahmoud Abbas. He's willing to do the best. He's been security coordinations with Israel. He's accepting everything to have peace, to have a peaceful future for the new generation. Enough is enough.
Thank you, Nabil. That was powerful. Gentlemen, speaking on a topic that is so sensitive and personal is very inspiring, let alone an issue that is so controversial, and it's tough to throw yourself into the middle of a conversation, a debate as heated as this one. It's inspiring for me that for someone that is aspiring to be someone like you, to be a change maker and have these tough conversations. Thank you for taking the time to share, and I'm looking forward to having conversations with you three in the future. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Alex. Thank you, God. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Nabil, Alex, Simi, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Guy and Nabil and Simi for having us.
Thanks, gentlemen.